to welcome you to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter. And today is day 55 in our reading. And I'm going through the Bible in 365 days. So I'm taking 1 year to read through the chronological Bible using the 1 year chronological Bible reading plan, which you can find online, or you can find it in a Bible. So you can actually buy a Bible that's called the 1 year. I did this yesterday, but I'm going to do it today too. The 1 year chronological Bible. And so they have 3 different versions: NLT, NIV, and New King James. And I just want to start today by saying I read an article. Actually, I didn't read an article. It was like a reel that popped up on my Facebook because I watch social media as well. And it was all about how there's no more color in the world. Like we're sort of like on this trend of no color. And I realized that almost every single day my clothing is colorless as well. So today included. So I kind of looked at myself and realized I need to put a little bit of color in there. So I will be doing that in the future. I don't know if anyone will even care, but I do. Because it's vibrant, it's exciting, and this is kind of mellow and just too chill, and that's not really my personality. So expect color in the future. I'm excited about it. That's my glasses, and now I got to do some crazy colors on my shirts. But we'll see how that works out. Anyway, I'll probably look and realize my entire wardrobe is all almond and gray and black and white. Anyway, today we are in the book of Leviticus, and I always try and give you just a really brief synopsis of what has happened up until this point and why we are here. So if you have joined me for the very first time today, I want you to go back at least to the beginning of the book of Leviticus, because this is not a place where you want to just drop in the middle of and check it out for the first time. Although if you do, and maybe it gets you a little bit excited about the book of Leviticus, could be a little exciting. But I would love you to go back to probably the book of Exodus. Best case scenario always is the book of Genesis. But if you go back to Exodus, at least you can get an understanding of who Moses is and how we got here. So here's my very short, brief description. These people were saved out of slavery because of God. Now God wants them to be holy like he is holy, and how he saved his people. And so he has had them build a house for him at the base of Mount Sinai. It's called the tabernacle, or it can be called the tent of meeting. Either one of those things you can say. They're sort of interchangeable with each other. And this is where God comes down and he meets them and he talks to them. He's going to talk to Aaron and his sons, and then the sons of sons of sons, kind of all the way down through multiple generations. This tabernacle is movable, so it's built, but it's on like tents and poles, and so at any point he can have everybody lift up and move to a different location and then settle down and rebuild the not rebuild, but sort of put it together all over again. And it is made in such a way that it is portable, which is very unique. So it's a portable home for God. And he is now preparing the Levites, which the Levites are, Levi is a son of Jacob. So if you remember back in the book of Genesis, Jacob is a son of Isaac, who was a son of Abraham, who had the covenant with God. And God said he would continue this through his people. And Levite is one of those sons. This is multiple generations down. And he is now in the tribe of the Levites. The Levites were given as the first sons of Israel. And so they were the ones who were to take on the priesthood and all things that have to do with holy things in the temple of God. And so we are learning more every day about, things that the Israelites need to do, things that the priests need to do, all of these things that will keep them holy and keep them in relationship with a holy God. I've said holy for the past 2 weeks. I think I've said holy more than I've ever said in my entire life. But one of the good things is it's really helped me out in my prayers to recognize what they had to do and what they went through in order to maintain a relationship with a holy God. And then the beauty of which we get to approach him, because Jesus has made that bridge between us and a holy God. I still think he needs to be approached in a very holy, respectful, loving, honoring way. I don't think we should be like, hey, buddy, what's up? But he has given us that ability without doing all of these sacrifices all the time and all these festivals and all these things that he's going to have us do. Jesus has prepared the way that we can meet with God, each of us individually too. So that's a difference, where these people are really giving all of their things to the priests in order for the priests to meet with God, right? So the priests are atoning for them and things like that. So this is a people group that is using this system to meet with a holy God, right? So to have a holy God dwell in a house among them, and for them to be able to meet with them, and for them to remain God's people. Okay, so that's just a little bit of a brief background. Okay, just had an amazing coughing fit off camera, so hopefully this blends well. All right, so we are on day 55. Day 55 is Leviticus 23 through 25:23. So not the entire chapter of 25, but 23 through 25. All right, and so the very beginning, I always like to start with the first verse in this chapter. This chapter is about the celebrations that they have with God. And so in verse 1, it says, going back to that, the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, these are my appointed festivals, the appointed festivals of the Lord, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies." And so, just a little work on the word sacred. This means of God, right? So, it's not just a party, that it's not just a place to have fun. And I'm sure it would get to that. So, even if I think about me in my time and I go to services on Sunday. My service on Sunday is not so I can meet with my friends, so we can hang out, so we can sit and drink tea, coffee, or soda or whatever together, right? Although that's an amazing perk that comes with being in a church that you love, that's not the primary function. The primary function is it is a sacred assembly, right? This is a way to go in and to honor the Lord. And so these festivals are those things. These are sacred, which means they are directly for God. Anything else is extra, right? But what we need to be doing is we need to be focusing on God during these assemblies, and we need to be remembering what it is that he wants us to remember in each of these. So we have a lot. I'm just going to name the ones that we have. This Sabbath, which is something that they practiced every week. The Passover, which is something they practiced every year. Unleavened bread, which sort of coincides with Passover. The festival of first fruits, the festival of weeks, the festival of trumpets, the day of atonement. I don't want to say it's a festival because it's sort of not that at all. And then the festival of tabernacles, which I think it's currently called the festival of booths. And so they have all of these things that are in honor of the Lord. And they happen, the Sabbath is every single week, but all these others happen every year. And so every year they're consistently getting together with people and they are lifting up and honoring God in these things. So let's just talk about each of them a little bit. I won't go too much. But on the Sabbath, which is verse 3, there are 6 days when you may work, but the seventh day is a day of Sabbath rest, a day of sacred assembly. So remember, this is they're getting together. So I think, again, for us, it would be how we get together at church on Sunday. For those of us who are Christian and go to a church every week, this is what we would be doing. And I know that's not true for all Christians, right? There are Christians who get together maybe in small groups because they don't feel comfortable to church, or there are Christians who unfortunately don't sacredly assemble at all. But some do it on Saturdays, right? So sometimes it's different. Some do it Thursday nights, whatever it might be. But this is what they created with the Israelites, the people of Israel, the ones they came out of slavery. So there are 6 days when you may work, but the seventh day is a day of Sabbath rest, a day of sacred assembly. You are not to do any work. Wherever you live, it is a Sabbath day to the Lord. So you are not to do any work on this day. You're not to be working. This is a day off for you. So a day off from your labor. One of the things that we saw when they first started going over, right, started going to Mount Sinai, is the manna that fell from fell from the sky that God created for them. And then God said, you're only to pick that for 6 days. Pick it. It's like you scoop it up off the ground, but you're only allowed to go out and get it for 6 days. So there won't be any on the seventh day. So that's one of the things that he said. So you are not to go out on the seventh day and try and get any manna. That is only for 6 days, but on the sixth day, he would give double the amount so that you would not have to go out on the seventh day and work, right? So right away, he prepared with a miracle, right? He prepared them for what that would look like on the seventh day, to not work and just to spend time with him and with their people, right? Because they're sacredly assembling, which means they are getting together. All right. And then we move right on. So the next one is in verse 5. This is the Passover. So if you guys remember from when we did the book of Exodus, there was a miracle where God killed all the firstborns of the Egyptians. And this was one of the plagues that he brought to the Egyptians in order to get Pharaoh to free the Egyptians, right? So they can go be God's people and they can go and worship God, right? So then God had to get them out of there. And so one of the ways that he got them out of there was by doing these things. One of the things that he did is he killed all the firstborn. But the Israelites were to kill an unblemished lamb, and they were to put the blood on top of their door, right? So over their door. So then when God came in, he would pass those houses over. When he would see the blood on the doors, he would pass those houses. And so no firstborns would be, because remember, it was the animals, it was the slaves in the house, it was everyone, right? It was all the firstborn children of the Egyptian people and the Egyptian animals. And so they would pass over completely the house of the Israelites. So none of the animals would die. None of the people in the house would die. And so they were to remember this as the Passover. And this is one time a year. And it starts on the twilight. So the evening sort of the 14th of the first month. And then right away the next day into the 15th, this is the festival of the unleavened bread. So this is where the first day they go and they sacrifice. And then they have 6 days where they kind of keep offering food, and then they sacredly assemble on the first day, and then on the 7th day, once again, they sacredly assemble. And again, this is another thing that brings up for me, like the amount we're so work focused. We are such a work focused people, and I would imagine as slaves, they were also a work focused people. I would imagine that they didn't actually get days of rest. I don't know for sure, but I can't imagine that Pharaoh, in building his kingdom, wants this, the people that are depending on him, I don't think he's giving them days off. But maybe I could be wrong. I'm not 100% sure. But what I do know is that they have a lot of days where they aren't working. And so they're kind of assembling instead of working, right? So they're taking this needed rest to be with God instead of working. So they have this festival, 7 days of food offering, and then the last day that they meet and they meet, and then they sacredly assemble again, and then they offer food one more time. So then I want to move on to verse 9. So in verse 9, we move to, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, so remember, this is the promise that he has been given to them, I'm going to give you, and reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of grain. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but this is before they eat the grain, they bring their first fruits to God. So before they feed themselves, they come and they feed God. This is going to be a festival every year at this time before harvest, right? This is the first fruits of their harvest. They're going to bring this to God, and they're going to offer this to God. And this is a Thanksgiving, right? God has provided for them. God has given them a harvest, given them food, right? And so this is a Thanksgiving to God for giving them their harvest. Then we're going to move on to this next one is 7 weeks later, there's a new grain offering. So 7 weeks later, if we go on to verse 15, from the day, so this starts the festival of weeks. So from the day after the Sabbath, the day you brought the sheaf of wave offering, count off 7 full weeks, 50 days, and then present an offering of new grain to the Lord. And then you bring 2 loaves, right? So then we do all these things and making a huge amount of sacrifices for the festival of weeks. So then going down to verse 22, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap the very edges. So we get this again, because he said this once already, but we get this again where they don't reap the edges of their property. They leave that for the foreigner and the poor, so they can come in and they can eat from their land, right? So they leave the excess for them. And so they just provide what it is around them. And then any of those edges, the poor get to come around and they get to take whatever's left over. All right. And then we have, I'm going to read verse 18. So verse 18, it says, present with this bread. So this is still the Feast of Weeks. Present with this bread 7 male lambs, each a year old and without defect, 1 young bull. Remember a lot about not having any defects. They will be a burnt offering to the Lord together with their grain offerings and drink offerings, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Then we're going to sacrifice 1 male goat. So it's all of these extra offerings, and sacrifice a male goat for a sin offering and 2 lambs, each a year old, for a fellowship offering. So again, we're getting all of these different offerings: burnt offering, sin offering, fellowship offering, wave offering. So he's doing all of those things in this section. All right. Verse 23, it comes to the festival of the trumpets, which I kind of chuckle. Only I think it would be an exciting time, something that we're just not used to, right? And so they kind of herald this time. So the Lord says to Moses, say to the Israelites, on the first day of the 7th month, you're to have a day of Sabbath rest, a day of sacred assembly, commemorate it with trumpet blasts. So every year they get these trumpet blasts, and then you don't do any regular work, but you present a food offering to the Lord. And then we move on to our Day of Atonement. Right away, it's following. So this is the trumpets is the first day of the seventh month. The Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the seventh month. So a lot happens in the seventh month. And then the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles is the 15th day of the seventh month. So we have a lot going on in the seventh month. So the Day of Atonement, if you guys remember, we went over in a lot more detail what happened in the Day of Atonement. But this was the day to deny yourself. So this day, so where the trumpets would signal maybe something joyful, right? This is a day that is you're remembering your sin, you're denying yourself, and you're remembering God. And then right after that, they have this huge celebration called the Festival of the Tabernacles, or the Festival of the Feast of Weeks. They also call it Sukkot, which I have a feeling I'm not pronouncing that right. It's Sukkot, but Feast of Booths, right? And this happens in the fall of every year. So I want to read verse 42 to you guys. In verse 42, it says, live in temporary shelters for 7 days. So this is when they are already in the land, right? The land that they go in. So the land of Canaan, land of milk and honey. This is when they're living in there. So what they're going to do is once they're in there, they're going to then come into temporary shelters. So tents, essentially, temporary shelters for 7 days. All native born Israelites are to live in such shelters so your descendants will know that I had the Israelites live in temporary shelters when I brought them out of Egypt. And so it's a reminder. He constantly wants his people to remember what he did, what they went through, how they changed, who they were, why they were who they were. He wants you to remember all of these things. When we forget, we live on our own. We are our own kings, our own gods, right? We start forgetting what is good, what is not good. We start forgetting what is bad, or remembering. We stop remembering what is bad, and in our hearts we start to turn in wicked ways, right? So right now there's and I'm sure there always was. Right now there is a very specific positioning on out in our world of what is right and what is wrong. And this is the thing that he wants you to remember. God is right. Nothing else is. God is right. We have to remember what God said. We have to remember what God wants us to do. Remember what God has for us, right? Because God did these things in Egypt to protect these people and to bring them out of that land. So they want their people for generations after to remember all of these things. All right, moving on to Leviticus 24. So we're still doing this. This is the Sabbath year. So this is where, again, verse 1, the Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites. So that, again, this is before they are living in the land. This is at the base of the mountain. He's talking to them. Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. So this is 6 years. So your land. So this is, I mean, obviously there's a ton of farmers that live here, right? There's a lot of feeding off of the land. Different than how we are now. Even though there's farming, it's different. So for 6 years you grow your crops, and then that 7th year you do not. You let the land heal because God says so, right? So he's saying, even give the land a Sabbath, give the land a chance to rest. You can eat whatever grows off that land, but he says, I'm going to make that year before so abundant that you can take that time off, right? So I'm going to make those years abundant for you. And then after that, we move right on to the year of the Jubilee, which is the 50th year. So they do this whole, they do that 1 year of Sabbath, and then they do that 7 times. So we're talking about a generation, more than a generation, right? 50 years. I feel like 100 years is not a generation. It's less than that. So more than a generation of people, you would go through this whole thing, and then you would have this one festival for 50 years. And again, he's going to make it so abundant that you can take this time off. So what I found interesting in this chapter is, so I'm going to go to verse 10. So in 10, it says, consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee, so a big party for you, a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to your own clan. So if you have maybe intermarried with other clans, or if you have moved to a different location, this is a year where you actually leave all of that and you get up and you move back to where you came from originally. So again, something that they're asking that would be a really difficult thing to do. So you're going to be moving back. You're going to be taking a whole entire year kind of off of whatever it is, if you're outside of that land, whatever it is that you were doing, and you got to move away from that and move back. All right, so I want to read on to this. So verse 14, it says, if you sell your, so this was an interesting section. If you sell your land to any of your own people or buy land from them, do not take advantage of each other. So right away he's saying, keep it holy, right? Don't take advantage of each other. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't do any of those things. You are to buy from, I'm going to read this section. You're to buy from your own people on the basis of the number of years since the Jubilee, and they are to sell to you on the basis of number of years left for harvesting. When the years are many, you're to increase the price, and when the years are few, you're to decrease the price, because what is really being sold to you is the number of crops. Don't take advantage of each other, but fear your God. I'm the Lord your God. So you're selling the land based on how much harvest time you have left in it between those 50 years, right? So someone's going to say, Jubilee just happened. You got 49 years left on this land before you have to go back to where you came from. So you got 49 years left on this land. So you're going to have 49 years in which that you can plant and grow. And so it's going to cost a lot. Or Jubilee happened. You're 35 years later and you only got 15 years left before you have to leave and go back. And so your land, then they're going to sell it for a cheaper rate, right? So it's selling it based on the land, because God's going to say here, this is God's land. This is not yours. So you don't own this land. God owns this land. And that's why you're freeing it after 50 years, because he's giving the land a rest. And he's telling you to go back to where you came from, or go back to where you were, the tribe in which you were born. In 18, it says, follow my decrees and be careful to obey my laws. And so if you do that, you will live safely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill there in safety. And then he asks later about, and I'll read this verse as well, but follow and obey what God says, and he is going to bless that land. He is going to give you abundant fruit in that land. He's going to bless that land as long as you continue to follow his decrees and his laws, right? So he's giving you a way to, he's giving the Israelites a way to keep this relationship the way that it should be, right? So holy and the way that it should be. As long as you continue to do this, he's going to continue to bless that land. So he's going to do all the things that he promised, because he's God. He wants you to do what you as an Israelite. He wants the Israelites to do the things that they have promised as well. All right. And then I just want to read verse 21. It says, in verse 21, because it says in verse 20, he says, you may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we don't plant or harvest our crops? And he says, this is the one that I talked about a little bit. I'll send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. While you plant during that 8th year, you're going to eat from the old crop and will continue to eat until the harvest of the 9th year comes. He's going to send so much fruit, it could last you for 3 years. So you are going to be so abundant as long as you continue to follow his decrees and his laws. He's going to bless you abundantly, more than we need, more than we deserve. All right. That's it for today. Ending on that note, moving on tomorrow, finishing up in Leviticus 25. I think we might be moving on to Numbers tomorrow. So I hope you are sticking with me. I hope you are continuing to read as we finish up a lot of what the Israelites have to go through. We'll kind of join in there tomorrow. If you liked what you heard, I want you to like it. I want you to share it. I want you to comment below. So I know there's a couple of you guys that comment, and I love reading all of your comments. I love reading what you saw when you read it, or any of your comments where you heard the things that I saw when I read it. So like it, comment, share it, subscribe to the channel so these can come to you every day. Keep reading. See you tomorrow.